first time I heard the word suicide, I was 7 years old. There was a gunshot in my neighborhood, a police response, and my mom sat me down at the kitchen table and told me the neighbor had committed suicide. I had my own first suicidal thought when I was 13 years of age. I was that kid with no confidence, no self-esteem, and I just wanted to get to high school to blend in. I got beat up by 3 guys in front of a group of kids, and when I went home, I remember I wanted to commit suicide. When I became a firefighter, I responded to suicides and attempted suicides all the time. Suicidal ideology among firefighters is very different than the general public's. They just recently did a bunch of surveys and that shown that 95% of firefighters feel critical incident stress. 65% are traumatized by calls they have been to. And that is why firefighters are 10 times more likely to commit suicide than the general public. One other stat that came out of those surveys, which is really hard to understand, is over 80% of firefighters feel that if they talk to their coworkers or their peers, that they would be found to be weak or unfit for duty. When I got my job as an assistant fire chief, I was so excited. I was going to be that guy who had an open door policy, and if somebody was struggling, they could come into my office and they could talk to me. I'd sit them down, and if they were having a down moment or they were having suicidal thoughts, I could help them. I moved to a department that was far away. I had to move my family. Firefighters, I didn't know. So when I got there, I had a problem. There was no trust. I was considered an outsider. First 6 months of my new career as a fire chief was very difficult. I was so fortunate to befriend a firefighter who just retired from a neighboring fire department. He heard I was struggling and came to take me out for coffee. He wanted to stay in the game, so he became the chaplain of their fire department. And he asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him about the 80% of firefighters felt they couldn't talk to their peers. And he said to me, let's help change that. And I said, how do we change that? And he told me, he inspired me to speak at conventions and go to other fire departments and talk to firefighters one-on-one about suicidal thoughts. He hosted a safe talk in his department, and everybody from the region came. It sold out. The momentum that we were building was amazing. And then he had this cool idea. He said, why don't I become the chaplain of your fire department? I can help you with your guys. He knew all my firefighters. Amazing idea. We gave him a badge, he got a number, he started working with my firefighters, and he started to teach me and coach me through my new position. It was amazing. He was the nicest man you could ever meet. You just sat beside this guy. It was like sitting next to a campfire on a rainy night. If our firefighters were struggling, he'd be there. He'd come in every 2 weeks with pie and ice cream with this big smile on his face. He was our pillar of strength. Our morale started to go through the roof. I'll never forget this day. It was March 29th, 2018. My daughter had come home from university, and we're having dinner, and she's telling us about university, and I'm telling her how great my job's going. I'm literally talking about how this gentleman has taken me to a new level, and the phone rings. And it's a firefighter from a neighboring fire department, and he says, Steve, I'm so sorry to tell you this. And what he told me was, my pillar of strength, my teacher, our chaplain had just committed suicide. I remember telling my wife and daughter at the table and then walking up to my bed, and I laid there. And I looked at the ceiling. I looked at the ceiling for 7 hours until I had to go back to work because I was that assistant chief in charge of occupational health and safety and mental health. So I phoned the department that I'd worked at before, and they sent over 2 peer support counselors. Then I phoned WorkSafe, and we pulled a critical incident response, and they sent counselors for 5 days to deal with every one of our firefighters. And then I knew a counselor, and I asked him for help for more, and he built a platform where our firefighters, at will, could touch a button and talk to a counselor. You know, when you lose someone in your organization to suicide, it's really hard to recover, but when you lose someone you love, it's almost impossible. I look back on that time and I think how difficult that was for me personally, but I also think how difficult it was for our department. But we did the right things trying to get out of that. And a few months after that event, I got called to a men's health initiative. It was a retreat in the forest set up for firefighters who were suffering from PTSD, and it was a suicide prevention program. They wanted 8 chiefs to come from all over the region, and they had 3 doctors. It was a 4-day program. So I went, sat down, a bunch of chiefs I've never met before, and we started to build trust and confidence. And we talked about stories of our life, and the doctor said, I want you to do something. You don't have to tell it, but it's therapeutic to just write down your feelings on a piece of paper. And he goes, I want you to tell us from when you're a little kid till the time you become a firefighter. And I told that story about high school. I had never told anybody that story before. I had blocked it out of my memory. I was ashamed of it. And then they had more little projects to do, and one of them was tell us about 2 of your worst calls, and I knew what they were, and one of them was my daughter got this potentially deadly virus and stopped breathing at home and was rushed to Children's Hospital. And every day went by, they kept telling us it was really dicey whether or not she was going to survive. And after about 7 days, they said, it's going to be a long haul. So my wife said, why don't you go home and spend time with our son? So I decided to do that. She goes, work your 4 days, come in between, come on your days off. So I went home, played with my son, and got him ready for daycare the next day, and I went to work. Being on shift a few minutes, we got a call for an unknown medical call. When we arrived, it was a 3-month-old little boy, not breathing. I remember doing CPR, and my partner trying to get the stuff out of the bag, and I was doing it, and I remember crying and tears dripping on my hand when I was doing CPR, because I could see my daughter's face flashing in and out as I was working on him. I remember going to the truck after ambulance came, and we couldn't resuscitate that little guy, and the captain opened the door, and typical fire service, he said, are you okay? And I said, yep, and he closed the door, and we went back to work. That night shift, we had a little girl, 11 years old, ejected from a vehicle, and I arrived, and I started doing CPR. She wasn't breathing, or she didn't have a pulse, and I did it all the way to the hospital. And I remember driving back from that call, and I was crying. And I remember I was in an ambulance, because they were giving me a lift back to Surrey, and they asked me, are you okay? And I said, yep. And they didn't say anything else. And the last call we had on those 4 days of work was a 2-month-old little boy. Mama did too much crack. She passed out. Little boy rolled off her lap and suffocated in the cushions. And I remember doing CPR, and the whole time I worked on those kids, I thought of my daughter. There was some sort of connection. I didn't know what it was, but it was kind of taking me over. Just so you know, my daughter came home to recover. And she's turned out to be a beautiful woman. And when my wife and daughter came home, my wife noticed something was wrong. And some firefighters came to talk to me and said, Steve, I think you should go see some counseling, which I did. And I was telling this story in this retreat among all these chiefs. And the amazing thing about this retreat was there was 8 people in there I really didn't know, but I had the confidence to tell them stories I wouldn't tell anybody else. So my friend who had passed away, it was happening. What we were trying to do to try and get people to talk about it was happening right in front of me. And the coolest thing about this retreat is we didn't just talk about all the bad stuff in our life. The doctors gave us tools after that. They talked to us about affirmations and visualizations and breathing and calm. And then they asked us to build our own program for ourselves. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever been to, and the timing was amazing for me. And one of the things that I left there with is I built my own program. And I go around and talk to firefighters about this program that I built. I ask them to build their own program, but if I'm doing a one-on-one with a firefighter, I'll tell them what I do, what works for me, and then hopefully it'll inspire them to make up a program for themselves. So I'm going to explain to you what my program is. When we get hired in the fire service, we're trained for medical calls, ABCs, airways, breathing, circulation. That's what we're trained. Well, I developed the new ABCs leaving that retreat with the help of those doctors. It's affirmations. They taught me affirmations. So in that group, in that circle of trust, every time they said something positive to me, for some reason I'd look at the ground. And the doctor said, Steve, how come you always look at the ground when we say something nice about you? I go, I don't know. He goes, something happened to you in your life where you can't accept a compliment. So he worked with me on affirmations. Now, every morning, I say something positive to myself, self-positive talk. I try and create little ripples of positive thoughts in my head so I can build a wave of energy towards the end of the day. And it works. I tell myself, whatever I got to do, I'm going to be able to do this. I tell myself that. It's been working for me. Second thing that I learned was breathing. Nobody had ever taught me how to breathe before, ever. They taught us meditative breathing, taught us tactical breathing. They taught us this really cool thing called square breathing. Special forces use it. Navy SEALs use it. SWAT, emergency response teams use it. Nobody's ever taught firefighters this. And you know what? I just had a call a few weeks ago. It was apartment structure fire. By the time I ran down to my battalion and turned my lights and siren on, they had updated me. 4th floor's fully involved, people trapped on their balconies, and they're on fire. I immediately started to box breathe. And box breathing is something that has changed my life. And I've shown it to people that aren't in the fire service, and it controls anxiety, controls your flight or flight. It's an amazing thing that nobody had ever shown me before. And I'm going to show it to you right now, exactly what it looks like. And I want you to think of a box when I show you this, because you need to visualize your breathing. So it's basically you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, and you hold for 4. And we're going to do it. Do it with me. Ready? Breathe in for 4, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 4. Breathe out for 4, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 4. One more time. Breathe in for 4, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 4. Breathe out for 4, 3, 4. Hold for 4, 3, 4. That breathing has been magic for me. And I left that retreat with that skill. And one of the last things is my ABCs are affirmations, breathing, and calm. This retreat was in the woods. It was in the forest for a reason. I run all the time. I got my music on, I'm running. Life is great, but I don't ever take my earbuds out, stop, and listen to what the forest has to offer. I do now. And if you work in an office or some environment where you can just change your day a little bit by just going outside and breathing some fresh air and getting in a place of calm, it will improve your mental health. It's proven. Getting in the forest and just standing in nature and looking for different colors, 3 shades of green, is therapeutic. So those are the ABCs, and I use them every single day. And one of the other things I learned in that retreat, if you know someone that's struggling, you need to go talk to them and ask them. The stigma in the fire service, 80% of people can't talk to the people they work with because they're ashamed or embarrassed. That has to change. And that men's initiative that they brought me into showed me it's changing. And the other thing I learned there, if you know of someone who may be suicidal or thinking suicidal thoughts, you need to go ask them, are you suicidal? Are you thinking about suicidal thoughts? And just reaching out to them like that makes a world of difference. So I hope you'll take my ABCs and build your own plan, and I hope you practice it, and I hope you improve your mental health. And I hope you show it to someone else, because you may help improve their mental health, and you may even save their life. Thank you very much.